Hello and welcome to Discovering True Health, your weekly deep dive into health and wellness. Thank you so much for joining us today. Before we get started, as always, please hit the subscribe button. It helps us out a lot, and you'll stay up to date on all our upcoming shows. You can also check out additional information on our website, Instagram, and Facebook. All those links are below. So I'm sure many listeners like myself have a loved one who's currently battling cancer and navigating the medical side of it. Unfortunately, cancer is currently the second leading cause of death in the US, and more younger people are now being diagnosed with cancer as well. In the 1990s, the number of cancer deaths in the US was over 539,000. And in 2023, there'll be approximately over 1.9 million new cancer cases, which is over 500,000 cases a day. And approximately over 600,000 people in the US will die from cancer in 2023. Also, the National Cancer Institute's summary of trends of cancer national costs in the US for cancer care were estimated to be $190.2 billion in 2015 and rose to $208.9 billion in 2020. So today we'll be discussing the very big business of cancer and mainstream cancer treatments. We'll be looking at the studies and facts around actual safety and effectiveness of mainstream cancer treatments, and we'll be talking about solutions and alternative treatments as well. So my guest joining me today for the second time is fellow economic journalist Antony Sammeroff. He's also a psychotherapist and author. He's author of an extremely comprehensive ebook called 7 Big Pharma Myths Debunked. And he's currently writing his new book called Big Pharma, None Dare Call It Quackery. So thank you so much for joining me again today, Antony.
Christy, thank you so much for having me back. I've really enjoyed our last conversation and keeping in touch with you since. And I guess what prompted this conversation was me sending you over one of the chapters of the book that I'm writing on, well, the truth about mainstream treatments and cancer. I was
Yeah,
glad you enjoyed it.
I really did. It was perfect timing because, like I said, I have a family member going through, so I
Mm,
sent that right over. And it's so comprehensive. By the way, I love the title. It's called "The Doc Calling the Rebel Quack."
right, right.
There's always a duck involved with your work. I love it.
Oh,
But
that's a good point, actually. Yeah, the Thank you.
before we get into the details, you did really deep journalistic
Oh,
work.
thanks.
You looked into the business of cancer and really brought in, and together in a really great, comprehensive way, some vital information. And of course, we're going to provide links to
hmm
all your sourcing as well, because I think that's important. People can do their own research. Can you first kind of share where you sourced your data and facts from, why you found that shocking, and also, kind of what your purpose was behind kind of putting this
hmm
together and how you put it together and the way you put it together?
All right, well, thank you. That's a good question. So I always try as much as possible to go to mainstream sources. Reason being, if you go outside of the mainstream, you might find really good evidence that the truth is even worse than they say it is. However, I don't just want to talk to people who are coming. I don't want the people that I talk to just talk to people like us, right? I kind of I want to talk to the general public. I want us to be able to hold our own when we go against people who are like, well, mainstream medicine is scientific and based on peer-reviewed and good science and double-blind studies and comprehensive reviews and everything in the holistic sphere is quackery. It's the doc calling the rebel quack, which came to me in a moment of inspiration. It was actually two moments because I wanted to make a joke on the pot calling the kettle black, obviously, and the doc sort of rhymed with pot, and it was like the kettle calling the kettle black, the doc calling the kettle black. That's not quite it. Anyway, so that was maybe channeled from the ether as a good chapter title. So thank you. Yeah, I guess so. What I wanted to show was basically that mainstream sources themselves have admitted that, in fact, that basically a lot of cancer treatment is not based on good science. In fact, if you go to 7pharmamyths.com and download my free ebook, you'll find that that's often the case in mainstream medicine. If you look hard enough, they admit, you've got mainstream sources admitting that most medications don't work for most people. You've got mainstream editors of some of the most prominent journals saying that a lot of studies are basically, that even the majority of studies are just basically advertising for the pharmaceutical industry, that there's a systemic habit of not registering studies that don't have favorable results, or collecting all the data from a study and then deciding what the study was meant to show afterwards. You pick one of 10 parameters that makes the drug look favorable and you highlight that one, and
Yeah.
ignore the ones that didn't go well, as far as you were concerned. So here's an interesting thing. Can you believe that the government and private insurance will pay huge sums of money for cancer treatments that have never even been proven to be effective in lengthening people's lives or improving their quality of life? In fact, let me see if I can get a statistic for this. You can come back on what I said while I look this one out.
And we're saying government funded, we're talking about taxpayer dollars.
That's right. That's what I mean. That's the horrible thing, because see, if you say, oh, they should run a study on, I don't know, let's say Gerson therapy. Um, they'll be like, oh, the government shouldn't be spending our tax money on quack treatments. But they are. They admit they are. So let's see, there was a comprehensive review in the British Medical Journal that noted that only 26% of the studies use survival as their primary endpoint. The rest use what's called a surrogate marker. A surrogate marker is something like, say we associate high cholesterol with a higher rate of heart attacks, right? So instead of measuring whether a statin actually extends people's lives, we just see if it lowers their cholesterol, and we go, well, it's lowered their cholesterol, it must therefore lengthen their life. Well, wait a minute, they might just die of a heart you know, they might die of diabetes or cancer, or something else at exactly the same time. Or they might live 3 months longer, but they live in much more pain. However, running studies is expensive. It can actually run $1 million a day sometimes. So if they can say, well, this drug lowers blood pressure, therefore, we know that it's effective at stopping heart attacks. If they can find a surrogate marker to measure instead, they can stop the study earlier, and that saves them a lot of money. But it doesn't actually prove that the drug improves patient outcomes. And this British Medical Journal review said that 69% of cases of approval of the new drug, they looked at 42 new cancer treatments or something in that region. 69% of the cases approval of new drugs was based on studies done on surrogate markers that didn't provide any real information on whether the drugs improved the patient's outcomes or even extended their lives. So you think, well, the tumor shrunk, so that must mean we've treated the cancer. Well, I mean, you might think that. There's just one problem with that, and it's a pretty big one. The oncology literature is absolutely filled with stacks of studies demonstrating that shrinking a tumor doesn't actually necessarily translate to better patient outcomes. People can die exactly at the same time or earlier from the toxicity of the treatment. They can bleed to death, they can get an infection because their immune system's been wiped out by the treatment. The tumor can shrink and then just grow back really quickly 2 months ago, quicker than it did the first time. Again, because the patient's immune system's been wiped. wiped out. They don't have the energy and the resources to fight the tumor regrowth. Maybe the treatment killed off all the weak cancer cells, and all the aggressive ones just breed quicker than ever. Even if patients do gain a few weeks or months, which typically with cancer treatments, mainstream cancer treatments, is, for the majority of people on these, with late stage cancer getting these aggressive treatments, sadly, if you go down the mainstream route, that's about what you can expect, weeks or months. But their quality of life might be appalling. And since the government and private insurance are paying for all this stuff, you want to ask if people shouldn't just be given the option of like cashing out and taking their family to like Hawaii or something like that to sip martinis on the beach for their and enjoy themselves, rather than die a slow,
In a
painful, agonizing
hospital.
death in a hospital. Anyway, thank you for allowing me to grandstand.
No, I love talking about this topic, about the studies, because, like you were saying, they picked this kind of endpoint. We're going to see if a statin lowers cholesterol, but they don't look into the other collateral damage that
Hmm.
that statin
And
causes.
it's very
Right?
serious.
And that can cause, I mean, it's hormonal issues, that can cause
Hmm.
thyroid issues, that can cause a cascade of other stuff. They're not looking into the damage behind
Hmm.
that. They're just like, oh, we're going to stop here. Okay,
Right.
cholesterol. Sure, it lowers cholesterol, but what else does it do below that by the mechanism that it's lowering cholesterol by? And that's the problem. They're stopping there and not looking into the harmful effects. And then doctors end up prescribing drugs on top of drugs, because suddenly you've got side effects from the statin that you need other drugs for, and side effects from those drugs. I mean, we
Hmm.
talked about that the last time you were on as well.
Yeah, no, it's surrogate markers is an excellent topic because it really highlights the poor quality of science. And obviously, your audience probably knows, like, cholesterol is a chemical that the body needs as a precursor to a whole bunch of different functions. So you can't just destroy the cholesterol that's leading to your higher case of heart attack. It's like, okay, we now know that SSRIs don't, don't like, we now know that that depression isn't caused by a chemical imbalance in the brain, a lack of serotonin. But let's suppose for a moment that it did. You can't lower serotonin, the serotonin that's giving you depression, hypothetically speaking, without lowering the serotonin that works in your digestive system, or works in your immune system, or works in any of the functions that serotonin fulfills in your body. So when the docs go around like tweaking, oh, we'll move this hormone, we'll move that. All of your hormones, all of the chemicals in your body support multiple factions. The body isn't a chemistry set where you can just like mix this chemical with that chemical. It's a holistic. So if you're worried about cholesterol, then you should like be looking at what's causing the high cholesterol. And I guess if you're worried about cancer, we should be looking at what's causing the cancer, and maybe addressing that rather than looking at the outside manifestations. Obviously, there's a view in holistic medicine, that I can't prove it, that a tumor is a landfill site, and what's happening is the body's choosing that place to store a bunch of chemicals, toxic compounds or cells that it doesn't want or need, right? So if that's true, what you've got is a toxicity problem. The first thing the doc does is come in with a biopsy and poke it with a needle. Well, that's the worst idea ever, because what you've just done is pop the landfill site open, and now the trash has gone into the bloodstream, is getting circulating all over the body, and then people wonder why they get secondary and tertiary tumors. So if that hypothesis is true, so I mean, that's yes, that if that is true, then the tumor is not the cancer. The tumor is just the tip of the iceberg. Cancer is a system-wide illness, um, of which the tumor is just the most conspicuous symptom, but everything needs to be addressed on the systemic level, and very rarely is something local. Even if you have pain in this little finger here, your third finger, there's a train of muscles that goes up the back of your finger, round your arm, round your back, round the top of your back, and maybe all the way down your spine. People get upper back pain, and they think it's something in their shoulder because that's where the pain is, but it's actually starting in their lower back. No matter how surface level the symptom may appear, everything is systemic. So that's my response to that.
Now, just to be clear, are you completely against all mainstream treatments, or are there some good and some are not, or there are certain situations that, they're better?
Yeah, well, I think that mainstream medicine is emergency medicine, and it definitely has its place. Thank you for asking that. But the thing is, they're treating every type of disease with emergency medicine. Surgery in particular for cancer can be completely necessary sometimes. If you've got a tumor that's impacting on a major organ, if you can't go to the loo because it's impacting on your colon, then you need surgery, and also it's curative in those situations. But you would want to be looking in a holistic way at the body when you from the moment you apply that. I had a teacher, Gary Tunsky, who used to say, tell your doctor, okay, if he wants to take you to surgery, okay, you've told me what you're going to do about my tumor, but doctor, what are you going to do about my cancer? And that's what we need to look at by addressing the body's basic underlying physiological needs: nutrition, detoxification, and emotional and psychological well-being.
Absolutely. I mean, I found this is just an example of what you said. My father was going in for a cancer treatment he was in a trial for a drug, and they're, going in and doing all these testing and treatments, and they have to spend a long period of time there. And yet they're giving them like
I
processed
know,
sugary food, like Coca-Cola. I'm like, what? So they're giving
I
some
know,
drug to treat your cancer, but then they're like, here's a bunch of
yeah.
sugar and processed food and chemicals to eat.
It's so interesting, isn't it, that the insanity of the system is not hidden.
Yeah.
It's so basic that even mainstream sources have reported, oh, studies show that people come out of the hospital more malnourished than they went in. This is stuff that you would think even mainstream people would think should be addressed. See, it's interesting to address the level of consciousness of the planet, because it's like when you're a bit switched on, like the audience of your show, and dare I say, you and I, um, you speak to people like us, and you get to start to think that most people must think at least a little bit like us. But people tolerate, don't even worry, I'm not even saying people tolerate the government and private insurance paying for treatments that their own studies say aren't that effective. That in itself is completely outrageous. And when you look at the amount of money they redistribute from normal people to them for the privilege, it's outrageous. You need to do a little bit of reading and digging to find that out. But I mean, the fact that they're serving food that is known to be unhealthy in a hospital where they're meant to restore people to health, I mean, people should be going out on pitchforks for that. But I mean, look, it's really funny because this used to be a conspiracy theory and you could get banned from YouTube for saying it. But mainstream sources came out and said, headline, the most common source of coronavirus likely to be lab leak. Uh, Mainstream headline newspapers, and people didn't go out with pitchforks to protest against them engineering a virus that led to shutting down the planet for over 2 years. But if they don't protest against that, I don't actually know what it will take to, I don't know how much abuse the general public are willing to have leveled on them before they wake up to it. Maybe they're just in a kind of weird dysfunctional relationship with our rulers.
Yeah, exactly. They're fluorided up and vaxxed up and they're on lots of pharmaceuticals. So yeah, it's
Someone's getting rich off it. Very, very, very rich.
absolutely. Yep. Now let's start with chemotherapy because that's one of the main ones.
Hmm.
What kind of things did you find in studies and in your research around safety and effectiveness?
Okay, so when we look, like, I want to be confronted on this because it looks almost unbelievable. So maybe when I start publishing stuff, people will send me other studies, but I'm like seeing mainstream systemic reviews uh, saying that chemo has 5-year survival rates, which are estimated to be as low as 2.1 or 2.3%, sometimes 3%. And I'm like, wait, what? They admit that it only works in like 1 in 50 people. And even then, um, you know, how do we know how many of those people would have lived for 5 years anyway? So, I mean, what would, I'm skeptical. It's like, is it just the really resilient people who are surviving, many of whom would have survived anyway? You're basically like setting off a bomb in the body, killing everything off and hoping the good stuff grows back faster than the bad stuff. Also, remember, almost all of the studies in oncology are funded either by the manufacturer of the treatments or organizations like, the American Cancer Society, National Cancer Institute, um, the, you know, um,
So they're either
institution,
government funded
institution
or
of, yeah,
they're
yeah,
funded
yeah. And
by drug
see,
companies.
whenever you say government funded, you can substitute industry funded because most of those institutions get their money from
Hmm.
from uh, from the cancer industry, as I like to call it. I think it's fair to call it that. So yeah, so that sounds like amazing. Wow, it only works in 1 in 50 to 1 in 45 people. Like what? And people accept that. People accept the government paying $250,000 for that. I mean, it's really quite shocking. So the question is, so as I said, why, if it's so transparently and effective, why do so many oncologists think that it works? And it's like it comes back to that, tumor shrinkage. It's like, or I guess people just assume that if something's been approved, then there must be the good science behind it. To be honest, it's not really in my opinion, in an ideal society, doctors might not necessarily need to read studies. I mean, we have experts for a reason. They should be able to trust the institutions.
Right.
It's just that they can't, we don't live in a society where you can trust the institutions, quite frankly. It would
And
be nice, if it
paid
would be
by
not,
industry,
yeah,
like you
yeah,
said.
go on.
I said they're paid by industry, like you said.
Hmm. Yes, they're paid by us, the everyone pays for higher prices for drugs that a huge percentage of which goes to schmoozing doctors, pharma reps, advertising on television, and all sorts of things that are basically shown in the literature to not what patients want is the best treatment with the least side effect, the most effective treatment for their condition with the least side effects. That's very different from what the interests of those who are paying for continuing medical education. Every doctor is obliged to go to continuing medical education. Who has the money to put on conferences? Um, well, I mean, it's ultimately going to be backed by some pharmaceutical company. Those reps, those guest speakers are not there to teach doctors to prescribe the best treatment with the least side effects. They are there to represent the companies paying for the education, which I think it would be more fair to call
Sales pitch.
indoctrination.
Right. Yeah.
Mhm.
I mean, that's understanding how that is actually all going down between doctors and pharmaceuticals and these educational, um, you know, conferences they go to. Now, you mentioned another study that I thought was quite shocking. It was in BMJ and it looked at the survival and quality of life benefits of 48 cancer drugs that were approved by Europe, the European Medicines Agency, EMA, between 2009 and 2013. Can you share a bit with us what that study found, if you have it up?
Yeah, I've got it up. This systemic evaluation of oncology approvals by the EMA in 2009 to 13 shows that most drugs entered the market without evidence of benefit on survival or quality of life. At a minimum, 3.3 years after market entry, there was still no conclusive evidence that these drugs either extended or improved life for most cancer indications. Where there were survival gains over existing treatment options or a placebo, they were often marginal. I would just add to that, in case you think anything's better in America, a 2017 paper published in JAMA Oncology revealed that of the 62 new oncology drugs approved between 2003 and 2013, only 43% offered a survival benefit of 3 months or longer, 11% offered a survival benefit of less than 3 months, 15% had an unknown survival benefit, and 30% offered no survival benefit at all. But here's the thing. 45% were associated with reduced patient safety.
45.
Excuse me? 45%. Almost half of the new cancer treatments reduced the life of patients. And this is in JAMA Oncology. And the oncologists aren't going fucking crazy saying, what did I spend 10, 11, 12 years going through medical school and a placement for pharma to deliver these quack treatments to us? Yeah, and it's people going to Mexico to have Gerson therapy that are being manipulated by quacks. Oh my word. It is a clown show. In fact, I would say it was a clown show, except for clown shows are actually occasionally funny and don't kill millions and millions of people.
Yeah, it's not funny at all. Absolutely. Now, this is shocking. So these drugs are being approved by the FDA with knowing that these are the studies that they have. I mean, the FDA knows this, and how is this all working? How are they getting approved by the FDA with these?
Yeah, I've not gone under the hood with these particular studies, but I would say that I can talk about in general, the FDA tend to say, well, the main thing we approve drugs that aren't very effective sometimes because there may be patients that can't go for another drug. So, because they're allergic to it or have an adverse reaction or whatever. So, we need to have these treatments as long as they're safe, even if they have limited efficacy for a small number of people. We want to approve them so people have the choice. And they get a lot of very poor drugs slip through the net on the basis that they were marginally more effective than the placebo. And it's very, very interesting how all our treatments are called snake oil and things like that, when actually if you just take a close look at what's going on in mainstream medicine, um having treatments that are even the thing is, a treatment is not really um judged on the market, if you can call it a market, by its efficacy. Really, it's the PR campaign surrounding um, convincing thought leaders in the given field to endorse it, which is ultimately going to determine how widely adopted that drug is.
Right. And they hire these sales forces, these sales teams that are very disconnected. They're not scientists, they're not experts, they're a lot of times just kids or people looking to make a lot of profit. And they're going out and basically selling these things.
Yeah, well, I mean, they're going into the right job if they want to make a lot of profit, because drug reps can get $20,000 a month expense accounts, use it or lose it, to schmooze doctors. So that's how effective schmoozing doctors is. And you know, um, if their job is to have good relationships with doctors, their job is to have good social skills, because it's not the quality of the drug that's important. A doctor will start prescribing treatments from the pharma rep they feel like they like, and because they feel like they can trust that pharma rep. So yeah, again, that's what you know, evidence-based medicine, it's really this authority-based medicine. So where what they'll do is they also here, the incentives are, if you're a prominent doctor or a academic, you can get sent to speaker training and sent on the world on a lecture tour and paid 4 or 5 figures for each conference, to represent a drug. So they don't need to find amoral like characters who will just sell whatever drug they're told. They just look around, see who's saying who believes what they already, whatever opinion they want to promote. They find someone who believes that. They find an academic who thinks that.
Right.
And then they just get them to, then they have, it takes so long. If you're an academic, it takes so long to write and submit a paper and have all of the sources and the research done in the right way and get all the footnotes and the index and the this and that. When you're approached by a pharma company and they're like, "Oh, we'll do all that stuff for you," or even
Just
"We'll do the
skipping.
study for you, and all you have to do is put your name on it as a co-author," you know, that helps you. That means you're going to get more offers for better posts at universities because you've published more. So, like, the whole incentive structure of the system is incredibly corrupt. Go on.
No, why hasn't anybody been sued or made, to be compensated by the families of patients? I mean, I would assume the cancer drug industry is very different as far as that goes, because it's like, but this is like end of life kind of emergency treatment everybody's feeling like.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing, isn't it?
Mhm.
It's not illegal to ghostwrite a paper. It's not, even though, like, I'm not really a huge fan of government interventions in the economy. I'm like a libertarian. But there's tons of government interventions in the healthcare industry already that have created this mess. One of them, the biggest one, is just basically stopping non-mainstream treatments from being legal. The other is throwing tons of taxpayer money at treatments that are not very good. Um, But if you were going to, most people think that government is of, by, and for the people. If it was in the medical industry, it would be completely different from that. There is no benefit there's no benefit whatever to even having pharma reps. So if the government was about, as I said, the purpose, what a patient wants is the best treatment with the least side effects. Therefore, anything that doesn't contribute to that, if you really wanted a government that was of, by, and for the people, would be illegal. That means it would be illegal to be a pharma rep. It would be illegal to run these um, continuing medical education conferences when the data clearly shows, whenever they check, that even doctors go, oh, no, 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 I just go because I have to, and I like, the meal at the hotel, the salmon's amazing, and it's good to meet other doctors and blah, blah, blah. I don't really take the presentation seriously. I know it's paid for the pharma companies. Of course it is, right? Even doctors who say that will still prescribe the drugs that they are, that will still prescribe whatever drugs they are sold by the pharma companies. That means there's no benefit to these. There's no benefit to them whatever. The only thing they do is waste huge sums of money that could otherwise be going to increasing people's well-being. And that's not what the money's going to now.
Yeah. Now, how do
Mhm.
insurance companies play into all this scenario? If cancer treatments don't have the studies to back it up, why are they so willing to pay for them?
One thing uh, that is a little bit perplexing to me is why insurance companies don't play more of a role as a check and balance, because you'd think that it's in the interests of the insurance company to pay out as little as possible for poor treatments, and they actually do have a massive influence on what hospitals do and don't pay for. So there's a few things I think I know that play into it. One thing is that you're mandated to pay for insurance through your employer, and most people don't stay in the same job for very long. So insurance companies aren't that bothered if you get sick much later, because it's going to be someone else's problem. You're probably going to change job, and you'll have a different insurance provider. Um, Another reason is a lot of the time they get a sorry, did I say kickback? I meant a reimbursement from healthcare providers that
Freudian
sorry,
Freudian slip.
yeah, it must have been a Freudian slip there. Sometimes they get a reimbursement from, the more they pay out, the more they get reimbursed. And there's also these pharmacy benefit managers who will go to companies, and basically the pharmacy benefit manager gets more money, um the more money that the insurance company uh that pays out. So sometimes they don't actually go for the cheapest treatment, because they'll just negotiate with one drug company or another for a bunch of deals, and they're more likely to pay for that one. Because so I guess if health insurance wasn't, mandatory, or there weren't such huge incentives for for employers to pay people in insurance, rather than just, but because here's the problem, right? People don't really understand um economics, and they think that, if your employer is paying for your insurance, they're really paying for your insurance. They don't actually understand that an employer has a certain amount of money to pay their employees, and whether they spend that on just giving them a raise, or insurance, or give them a longer tea break. Of course, you drink coffee in the US, not tea, or a nicer staff room, or any in-kind benefits. You're not getting those benefits as well as your wage. You're getting those benefits instead of your wage. So, I mean, most people, if their employer said, well, we could pay 2 grand for your insurance, or 1 grand 500 and give you $500 in your pocket, most people would take the $500. But that's not what's happening. So I guess there would be more incentive for insurance companies to serve as a check and balance if um, the government wasn't so involved. So,
Yeah. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Now, you mentioned in this chapter between 1971 and 2009, when this war on cancer
mhm,
and billions of dollars were taxpayer dollars were spent by the National Cancer Institute to kind of fight the war on cancer. So what was kind of, so to speak, the return on that investment as far as reducing cancer and death rates that you found?
Well, there's a drop in the death rate of 5% between 1950 and 2005. And this was during a period where heart disease fell by 64%. Um, and the death rate from flu and pneumonia fell by 58%. So, um, as I've said before, there's a lot of funny, I think we might have talked about this in our, we've probably spent over $500 billion by now on the war on cancer, okay? So nothing, everything comes at an opportunity cost. If you're spending 500 billion on research and cancer treatments that try to poison you to health, that's at the expense of everything else we could have done with the money. So we should take that seriously. It's probably enough money to have housed every homeless person in America. So it's 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 certainly enough. The thing is, what people don't understand is that more cancer treatment does not, sorry, more healthcare does not reflect in better health outcomes. In 2008, the state of Oregon inadvertently run a randomized health insurance experiment where they just had some extra money and they didn't think, well, maybe we should give people a tax rebate. They thought they just give extra health insurance coverage to 10,000 citizens that were assigned during a lottery, but there was no improvement in their health outcomes. But they did get more hospital admissions, and and there was a lot more treatment because they went in. So doctors did what they do, which is diagnose people. Uh, but they weren't any better for having the healthcare. So I mean, if you were going to run a public health program, it wouldn't be that actually um, improve people's health. It wouldn't be giving people more healthcare.
Right.
So because there's other things you could do. Like, for example, did I tell you this in the last show? In the 1900s, in New York, every summer, all these mosquitoes would come over from New Jersey, which was basically a swamp, and give everyone malaria and yellow fever, uh, except for the rich people, because they just pick up their stuff and go somewhere colder. So it's like 2023, and it's the same. Like poor people have more diabetes, and diabetes is obviously implicated in everything: cardiovascular health, heart attack, stroke, kidney failure. So if you're going to run a public health program, you don't throw $500 billion at cancer treatments that are shown to be completely or hardly effective at all. You just make sure everyone and the poorest areas have clean drinking water. You'd subsidize farmers to put minerals in the soil and regenerative farming so that people are getting nutritious food. You'd invest in workplace safety, sanitary living conditions, like make sure that people, like have programs where people go and engage in their community, heart disease and diabetes prevention programs, which by the way have been shown to work a lot of the time, but then they get shut down because they lose the hospital money, um, and then and stuff like that. Now, I'm not like, as I said, I'm not really an advocate of government programs. I'm just saying that if you believe in this stuff, you wouldn't go anywhere near spending $500 billion on the war against cancer. So I'll just say a little bit, one more thing. What would you know? Cancer rates have fallen for a few kinds of cancers. For example, lung cancer, but that's mostly because consumptions of cigarettes has fallen dramatically. And then, we there's a decrease in the recording of colon cancer, but that's because they used to use this PSA test that was very unreliable, that's not routinely used anymore. Oh, another way they were butchering people, making them incontinent and impotent for no reason except for they made tons of money doing it. And uh, then they went, oh, sorry, we made a little mistake. Our test isn't very effective. So um, that's one thing. Where cancer rates have fallen, it's not because of advances in healthcare, but it's all the ways that they bend statistics to make it look like people are living longer for cancer treatment,
Freaking
even when they're not. Yeah, because if they test more, then they catch the cancer earlier, and that makes it look like people are living longer when actually they're not. And also more testing means more false positives. And what people don't realize is you a lot of people with these cancers, you can get some of these cancers and live a completely normal life, 10, 20, 30 years. You can die above the average lifespan without that ever becoming an issue or becoming for you. And also, slow growing cancers are also factor into the 5-year survival rates, even though all those people who would live for a long time anyway would probably live for 5 years even if they hadn't been treated at all. So if they're so good, you need to wonder why they do all this messing around with statistics.
Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, because I have seen the headlines, from some of the mainstream, cancer rates have fallen or death
Mm,
fallen 33%. And I went and tried to read this, after read the study,
hmm
and I'm like, it doesn't actually say that.
No. No, it doesn't even vaguely say that.
No,
So, um, yeah, and it's like their own they always neglect to mention um that the that even where cancer rates have fallen, it's usually down to factors outside of mainstream treatments. Um, so that's yeah, because they're trying to blur the lines and make it look like medical advances are being made.
that's a big one that makes a lot of sense. Like you said,
Hmm
they're catching it earlier. So the person probably would have lived the same amount of time, but they're just catching it early and saying, "Oh, you have cancer. That's doc," and adding that into the statistic, and then the span that they're living after, instead of catching it at the tail end. And when, I mean, it would have been the natural course anyway. That's
hmm
the point. Now, what I love about your work is you're an economic journalist. You kind of look
hmm
at that portion of it as well. So zooming out on the whole cancer business, in your mind, if it could be restructured in a better way, what are some of your ideas around that?
Okay, that's a good point. Well, I really feel we need a system that made more money when people got healthier and less money where people got sick. The fact that the system makes more money when people get sick is essentially the source of all the problems. If you could turn the incentive structure on its head, then you might be onto something. One thing that's worked very well in Singapore is instead of having health insurance, you invest into a health savings account, and people shop around from their health savings account for the best treatment at the best price, and that puts the kind of market competition on um uh, in favor of the best treatment at the best price, and also would lead to people having better information because people shop around for a car, but they don't shop around um for the best treatment at the
It's
best
got
price
net,
because
we
they
have
they, they never
networks.
they never they never see what Medicare or their insurance company is. Sorry, go on.
I was just saying we have these networks, so you can't,
Hmm
if you're you can't get it, you can get a doctor out of your network, but that's gonna
mm
cost you. So
hmm
it makes a lot of sense if you're adding that.
Yeah, so they actively discourage people from uh participating in the choice. We need to get the government, and we need to stop the fact that studies are run by pharmaceutical companies. The government should not be the arbitrator of what treatments people can and can't have access to. Instead, we should have third-party certifiers, which, like Underwriters Laboratory, the people who, the Soil Association. Now, if there was a network of these third-party, each of these agencies, they're they would aim to be the gold standard in a certain area, whether it's the efficacy or the safety studies. And they could put their logo on a drug that they endorsed. And if they endorsed a drug like Vioxx, that could destroy the reputation overnight. The problem is, if people find out that there's horse meat in Kentucky Fried Chicken tomorrow, everyone's going to boycott them. The difference between eating a chicken and a horse, I don't know, but people care about that kind of thing. Um, you know, but there's no consequences to the FDA if they endorse a bad drug or keep a good drug off the market. So there's no checks and balances. The FDA is meant to be the checks and balances. They're not open book. They don't want the public to see their decision-making process. They say whatever, people should be able to trust the FDA, trust the experts. However, all the science should be open book. If these third-party certifiers were open book, their competitors could go through the literature and see if they made any mistakes and go, aha, see, they're not reliable. But also, where appropriate, they could cooperate with each other, and in other areas they could compete. There would be the incentive to create long-term studies. There's very easy ways that we could get a lot more data on what the long-term effects of drugs are, because you could do very easy things like um, if we have two drugs for the same condition that we don't know which is better, you just go to the patient and say, "Hi, we're collecting data on these two drugs actually. Um, would you like to participate? If so, press the green button. If not, press the red button. And if you agree, your data will be anonymized and put into a big database." Insurance companies have tons and tons of data on patients when they start taking treatments, when they stop taking treatments, how long they take them for, what they take them with, what they're like, what certain aspects of their lifestyle are like. This could all be anonymized and crunched into numbers and give us more reliable information on drugs if there was the option to do that. um, if there was the institutional support for doing something like that. But, none of this is done. And maybe none of it's done because people might be very shocked when they find out how ineffective their drugs actually are. So that might be um, one of the stopping points for getting better science in medicine.
Yeah, it's so important. And really looking into other effects, like we were talking about earlier, just, oh, does it make the tumor smaller? Great.
Mhm.
What else does it do?
Yeah. A third party certifier would never endorse a treatment just because it made the tumor shorter. Sorry, just because it made the tumor shrink rather than because it improved patient outcomes, because they're going to look like an idiot when another company comes along and says, well, that's, you know, as I say, the FDA is not in competition with anyone.
That's
It's all a big club, and you're not in it. They're all on one side, and it's not yours. And the same goes for the courts, because a court case took place in 1979, and at first concluded that citizens have the right to forego conventional, the right to forego conventional cancer treatment and use their whatever other treatments that they find comfort in. Okay, that's what they said. And then the FDA goes to the Supreme Court and says, no, we don't like that. We don't want patients to be able to go outside of the mainstream treatments because it's our job to decide what treatments are guarantee a therapeutic gain, right? The patient should be guaranteed a therapeutic gain. And the only way that they can be guaranteed a therapeutic gain is if we say that it's approved, which is a little bit of a joke when you consider how many treatments the FDA has approved that actually showed negative efficacy. In fact, I list a bunch of them in my free ebook, which you can download from 7pharmamyths.com.
Great book. I highly recommend it. Easy
Mm.
read, very comprehensive. It's an excellent book.
Yeah, and it's pretty short as well, so you can get pretty educated on some of the main points in a short time. And you can get on my mailing list, so you'll definitely know when there's something in paperback, which should be pretty soon, that you can hold in your hands.
Yay, I'm looking forward to that. Now, I'd like to also give people some information on non-drug, non-toxic cancer treatments out there that would be less painful, promote better health, better quality of life, and support the body. What are some of them that you
Okay. Yeah, and I'm not an expert on those non-cancer therapies. I would really like um for there to be more science on them. I fear somehow they would fall afoul of the powers that be. But I think if you look at the work of, say, Gerson and Nicholas Gonzalez, um, they and their kind of circle of adherents, they really looked at how different. Well, Gerson is a little bit one size fits all. Nick Gonzalez was more like looking at um, how diet plays a role in in different diets actually work for different people, which was quite challenging to me. Um, kind of after, yeah, we all have our prejudices when we come at this information, but I think I've always tried to remain as objective as possible. So there's stuff that we know works, right? Pancreatic enzymes, very, very important for anyone who has cancer. The best, is if you can get an animal's pancreas that is filled with enzymes.
Oh,
But there are second best sources and things like that. Um, uh, juicing, coffee enemas, hyperbaric chamber, and you obviously if your body's compromised to that degree, you want to look at eliminating junk food and your extra pesticides, glyphosate, lower your toxic load. Um, Another thing I definitely recommend people start doing is get a flannel and some organic castor oil and a, in a glass bottle and put a couple of tablespoons on the flannel and lay it over your liver at night. I found castor oil on the liver extremely effective, but do not exceed the uh, recommended dose because I had an incredibly ridiculous Hexenhammer over detoxification reaction, um, and it was not pleasant. It went on for ages, and I just had to ride it out and drink like 10 liters of water to try and help my body catch up with the. I didn't know that my liver was so toxic. Um, then you need if your weight is out of control, that's a factor. There's exposure to radiation. All of these things. The more stress your body's under, the less energy it has left over to deal with your cancer. So we see in most patients, so plant-based diet and the juicing is is best. There's some patients that seem to do better with red meat in the diet, and even some people find that if they follow something like Gerson, which is all no, it's actually um he included some animal products, very very specific ones. But a lot of people go down that road, and I'm vegetarian, um, but some people find they run out of juice if they do that for a couple of years, and as soon as they introduce just a little bit of meat, then they actually have much more energy and they do a lot better. So that's what that was challenging, but I try and go where the evidence leads. Then there's a lot of non-drug related cancer therapies that are actually even supported in mainstream literature that don't get a lot of light shone in them. And if we had if we reallocated the resources that are getting wasted on dead ends, then we could really find out how to combine them with diet and make it work for people. So there's stuff like Obein, Ouabain. G-strophanthin the um is the active ingredient from strophanthus seeds. Quentin plasma, deuterium depleted water, melatonin, chaga tea, mistletoe, burdock, Coley's toxins, curcumin, and turmeric mixed with ghee and black pepper to maximize absorption. The more research is needed, but these have already been shown to have some therapeutic patient for at least some patients. So there's stuff out there, and I guess people will need to, those fateful words, do their own research.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing that. And you had also mentioned, you mentioned this prior, and it's such a great point about the soil depletion, because we just did with Dr. Bronstein about iodine being tremendously missing from soil and in turn our food, and that causes types of cancer. So, I mean, yeah, we need to get to the root cause of it. And
yeah, we need to stop talking about disease and start talking about health, and that's why it's good that your show is titled as it is.
Discovering True Health.
Discovering True Health.
That's what we're looking
So,
for.
I think I've certainly done most of the talking again. So maybe one of these days, I'll pass you the mic for longer than a minute or two. But thanks for being such a gracious host again.
Absolutely. And you already mentioned some of your sites. Before we go, do you have any other resources you want to mention?
I think the main one is 7pharmamyths.com, unless you want a psychotherapist who yells at you about mainstream pharmaceutical treatments like your dad yells at the television, in which case I'm pretty easy to find on social media, or you can go to beyourselfandloveit.com. And with a website name like beyourselfandloveit.com, who could resist but book me for a consultation?
It's a great name. Well, I will post links below to all your contacts, as well as your ebooks and references of everything we talked about. And thank you again for joining me today and sharing all this incredible investigative journalism research that you've done. This is so helpful for everybody, and you've put it together in such a comprehensive way and really laid it out. So we're looking forward to your new book coming out. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much for having me back and helping me reach a wider audience with this information, because it does take a lot of time. So it's good when it gets in front of people that it might be able to help, or they might be able to share it with someone that it might be able to help.
Absolutely. Spread the word. If you like this video, please like it and share it with others. This information could really help someone you may know. And if you haven't already, hit the subscribe button to be sure you don't miss out on our future shows. And I will see you all next Wednesday on the next episode of Discovering True Health.